And I am very excited today. Our guest is known as the Queen of African Tech, a renowned businesswoman and entrepreneur. Her political and social activism know no bounds. She is the CEO and founder of AppsTech, a leading global provider of enterprise application solutions. Her foray into business started when she was barely into her teens, and there has been no stopping her ever since. She co-founded the African Business Angels Network and chairs ActivSpaces, which supports tech entrepreneurs from 2 hubs in Cameroon. She was listed as a top female tech founder in Africa by Forbes Magazine, and the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland named her a global leader for tomorrow. A recipient of numerous awards, we had better meet her because her achievements will not let us start this program. So everyone, let us welcome the wonderful, the beautiful Ms Rebecca Enonchong. Welcome,
Hello.
Rebecca.
Hello. Thank you. I'm so happy to be on.
Thank you so much for joining us. We know that you're very busy, and for you to take the time to be here, we're so pleased with that. Your presence has been greatly anticipated, and our audience will be sending some questions throughout the interview for you. So to our audience, do not forget to send those questions. So Rebecca, you're very well known, but just as equally not known. So the Cameroonian audience would want to know this part of you that has so eluded them. So I will, with a straight face, ask, are you married, or do you have a partner, and do you have kids?
Wow. Okay. She started with the hardest for me. I've always been a very, very intensely private person. Even like my own family, like extended family, always wonders about my life and my private life. And the reason that I don't talk about it is because I am such a public person, and I need to protect those that are closest to me. And so I don't usually talk, I don't talk about it. I have a family, but it's not one that I want to put out there in the Twitter sphere, on the internet. So it's really just to protect them from because I say things and I do things, and I can take responsibility for my actions, but I don't want those that are closest to me to suffer from it and suffer the consequences of it. So I really am a very, very, very private person because of that.
Okay, we totally understand, but thank you for letting us know that. So I understand you're a princess from the Besongabang royal family, as your father was king.
Yeah, Princess Ebanga, indeed.
Wow. So your father's reign was very much marred by the dispute of his position as the rightful ruler. And it is a long story, which I'm not going to get into because we'd be here forever. But your family finally won the case after 13 years of battle from 1997. The case was eventually declared won by your family in 2010. So do you think that the government involvement politicized the king-making process and somehow devalues the tradition and culture of not just Besongabang, but other tribes as well?
I think that what happens is that any time the government, especially this government, touches anything, it's very political. It shouldn't be. Our cultural leaders, our traditional leaders should be governed and selected by tradition and not by the government. But what has happened is that the government has used this as means for some political for political reasons, really, so that if you're not in their camp, they will they won't support you, they will fight you, and so on and so forth. So I think this is one of those areas where our government has so many challenges that it's not been able to, it can't focus on, that I think chieftaincy in a village as small as ours, Bisongabang, it's just a waste of government resources and just another means that the government uses to control its citizens.
Yeah. So actually, moving on from this Besongabang issue, your father, it's quite an interesting figure. Some people might not know who he was. So your father is Chief Henry Ndifo Abi Enonchong. He was a renowned barrister, a business magnate, a luminary. He's also famed for helping to create the Bar Association in Cameroon. What do you remember your father for, Rebecca?
Oh my goodness, for standing up for his beliefs always in all circumstances. He was fearless. And he taught us about hard work,
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody that worked so hard. This man worked until his last day
Oh my.
on this earth, and he worked. He got up in the morning and started, giving instructions, and had a heart failure. But really, it's he was fearless,
Yeah.
and incredibly hardworking, very, very, very diligent, very like paid a lot of attention to detail, very organized. And it wouldn't seem like that when you look at how our state is going on right now. But he was
Exactly.
somebody that was incredibly, incredibly meticulous. And I think people don't realize how much that was that impacted him as a lawyer. He was the first Cameroonian lawyer in Douala.
Oh
So,
wow.
and people don't realize that. And many the lawyers that were in Douala at the time were all French.
Yeah.
And they told him that he couldn't practice in Douala, that he could only
Mhm.
practice in the Southwest or the
Yes.
Northwest.
Oh wow.
But if he wanted to practice in Douala, then he
Hmm.
had to pass the French bar. And my father sued. My father
Yeah.
actually filed a lawsuit and requested 1 franc as 1 franc at the time as
Yeah.
compensation. But he won that lawsuit, and this was the beginning of the creation of the Cameroon Bar Association.
Yeah, and your father did not just found the Western Cameroon Bar Association, but he went on to find the integrated Cameroon Bar Association, both the Francophone and the Anglophone one that we have currently.
Yeah, that's correct. We I think my father was a great believer in coming together as a nation.
Yeah,
He even though and this is, I always say how privileged I was to grow up in a household where um this was such an important issue. We didn't start talking about the Anglophone issue in 2016. This
yeah.
is something that I grew up with. And he
Hmm.
created an organization in the early 90s
Hmm.
called the Cameroon Anglophone Movement.
Oh yeah,
And he chaired that organization for some time. This
yeah.
is the organization that became, that has grown and continued in its various forms. But he was obviously very, very active in fighting for the rights of Southern Cameroonians.
Yeah, I do remember that the Cameroon Anglophone movement were very instrumental in the first all Anglophone conference that was called in the 90s when we were discussing, the reformation of the constitution. So they were the ones who, had a huge input in the Boya Declaration that unfortunately was, ignored, and we're where we are today. So your father did great work, and may his soul rest in perfect peace. So, moving on from your father, I understand that you were born in Cameroon, but so how long were you in Cameroon for before moving to the States, as I understand?
So I was born in Yaoundé, and we moved to Douala when I was about 2 or 3 or 2.5 years old, about almost three. And then I moved to the US when I was between 14 and 15.
Yeah. Oh, wow. So when you moved to the US, you then studied science and economics at the Catholic University of America. So how did you end up in technology?
So I started actually, I started in first studying international relations, same as my mother at American University. And then I was able to obtain a partial scholarship, at least to Catholic University. So I transferred there and decided to study economics. My goal was to work in international organizations, perhaps like the World Bank or the IMF or something like that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like a smooth ride. It wasn't like, okay, I graduated high school and then I went to university straight out, and then
Yeah.
I graduated and then I worked. It wasn't like that at all. So I actually it was off and on. I worked my way all the way through school, and
Mhm.
so that a slowed down my schooling, but it also
Yeah.
um, allowed me to work and gain job experience and work experience while I was going to school, which helped me greatly when I finished school. So,
Yeah.
you know, some of the jobs that I had were in sales. Like I always say that my first job was one of the ones that I learned the most from,
Yeah.
probably because I was selling newspaper subscriptions door to door. And so
Yeah.
I would go from one door to another and I would have doors slammed in my face. I would have people insulting me. I would have
Oh,
people that
wow.
would never open the door. But,
Oh,
you know, I
dear.
learned so many valuable lessons about that, and
Yeah.
that, you know, the next door after the one that just slammed it may be your opportunity. That's probably the person that's going to buy the newspaper subscription from you. So,
Exactly.
it really taught me never to give up,
Yeah.
that the opportunity is just, it could be just the next door. And it doesn't mean just because a door is not is slammed in your face or a door isn't even open has
Yeah.
no bearing on your abilities. And so that was a lesson, a life lesson for me that I learned
Hmm.
very early on. I was just 15 years old, but that company
Hmm.
later recruited me to work inside their office. And so I
Exactly.
was working inside their office, and one of the things I was doing is their bookkeeping. So their accounting, their small accounting,
Yeah.
is what I started doing, and then I started doing more and more of that.
Yes.
And so I was doing a lot of finance, and then when I finished school, I was still in finance, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
and that's how I came into technology,
Oh,
because I was using technology tools in order to do whatever finance I needed to do. So that's how I came into technologies, by being a user
yeah.
of technology, and I just really fell in love with it. I don't know, it was just something that happened. There was just this thing that happened when I would literally take computers apart and then
Yeah.
try to put them back together, and just
Wow.
for fun. You know, this was my
Yeah.
entertainment and I loved it. And there was just this connection that happened with computers that I can't describe till today. It's still this like such an exciting thing, because I'm still blown away by the
Yeah.
fact that
Yeah.
this is just people made this, and then they just added zeros and ones, and here we are talking live on each other, and like you can see the image, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
This is mind-boggling to me, you
Yeah.
know. Like
Mm.
it's to me, it's amazing, and I'm excited about it every day, and excited about the potential of
Yeah.
technology to transform our daily lives. You know,
Exactly.
look at how mobile phones have transformed our lives.
Exactly.
It's just incredible. So
Yeah.
I'm just really blessed and happy that my father first was able to see some of that technology while he was
Mhm.
still alive, and
Yeah.
see me using technology as a way to create wealth and create a business.
Yeah. Wow, that's a very interesting story, and I like the how you're always so positive, even when you got people rejected your offers when you were selling newspapers, and also your growth within that company and your interest in technology. And now look at you sit on a board with on Salesforce, but we'll come to that later. So you're not new to starting and running businesses, and I would have asked you the question: what inspired your decision to start a business? But obviously, you've kind of given us a peep into that. But in a BBC interview recently, you said that what sometimes gets in the way of starting a business is that people are too educated. Now, I was a bit taken aback by that statement, but just for our audience, can you explain further where you're coming from with that?
Well, I think that sometimes we know too much and it holds
Yeah.
us back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I always say that the best entrepreneurs didn't do an MBA, right? Because when you do an MBA, you
Mm.
over understand the issues. And to be
Exactly.
honest, when you look at the challenges of starting a business, if you
Yeah.
know how difficult it's going to be, if you know
Mm-hmm.
how risky it's going to be, because you've
Mm-hmm.
done all the calculations, and you'll never do it. So that's
Exactly.
why I said that you could be too educated. When I meant that is that you can be in a situation where there's just too much of information that you
Yeah.
have, and
Exactly.
then you become risk averse. And
Yeah.
so that's what I meant by that. It's sometimes, when you're an entrepreneur, not knowing that you're right in front of an abyss and that you could jump,
Yeah.
and your life is over. Sometimes it's good not to know how close you are to death,
No,
and keep you alive. And so, when you see the abyss, you build a parachute and you
yeah,
survive and thrive.
exactly.
But
Yeah,
if you know that sometimes it'll slow you down, you're like, oh, it's crazy, right? Because
it is.
entrepreneurship does take a lot of crazy.
It does indeed. And I'll ask you a question around that, but that's like the next question after this one. So you also mentioned that being in tech, you must think as a business person. So there is this thing like people often think that, okay, I can write code, I can create programs. So getting into the tech business shouldn't be a problem because I've already got the necessary skills. I can create the programs that I can then sell. But then how is it like, does that mean that as a tech person, you have to, it's a balancing act, you need to have two skills as opposed to just the one?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're just trying to create a product, then you
Yeah,
don't need any business skills. But if you're trying to create a business out of
yeah,
that product, then you
exactly.
better have business skills, you
Yeah,
know, and some of our entrepreneurs that are more focused on the technology,
yeah,
it's hard for them to, you know, understand the finance side. And,
mhm,
they go and sometimes try to raise money in front of investors, but they don't understand the business aspects. And that is so critical in order to be a successful entrepreneur.
yeah,
And if you just want to do a product, perhaps,
mhm,
and don't want the business side, perhaps then you could join forces with other entrepreneurs, and who are more business minded, and
exactly.
launch together,
Yeah,
and be a co-founder instead of just a sole founder, and collaborate and cooperate,
mhm,
and then build something together. But I think if you really want to be successful, you
mhm,
have to arm yourself and give
yeah,
yourself many of the tools, that will allow you to be successful as possible. I'm still learning today. I learn every day. I spend hours and hours learning every week,
what?
something new. I probably spend about 20 hours a week
Yeah,
learning something new, like
mhm,
learning sometimes about technology, sometimes about startups, sometimes
yeah,
about nutrition, like
yeah,
all these things interest me. I'm so curious, and I just love to just learn. And so I,
yeah,
I encourage entrepreneurs to learn as much as you can so that you
yeah.
have the right skills, to be successful.
Yeah. So I came across a quote in one of your blogs that read thus, to be an entrepreneur, you have to be crazy, which you already mentioned earlier. So this is that question. And to be an entrepreneur in Africa, you have to be raving mad. Now, I'm just going to give people a bit of a background to some things that you've been through and then link that to the question that I'm going to ask you. So having read about your case with MTN Cameroon, who refused to pay your company AppsTech invoices of well over $3.2 million, one can understand the frustration. You even had to write an open letter to President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa, and he was the then chairman of MTN at the time. Now, one would feel that you'll be spared the pangs of racism on the continent, but you mentioned in your blog that statements were made to your team, such as, "For Africans, we have already given you a lot of money." So that must have added insult to injury. So, in your opinion, Rebecca, is it about a company culture or a people culture? Otherwise, why was MTN so belligerent in its treatment of you and your staff?
I think there was a combination. The people that were working on the team, on the MTN side,
Mhm.
were white South African, and had a very, low view of blacks
Mhm.
in general. And so I
Yeah,
think, there was really definitely a conflict of culture,
yeah,
because most of the people on our team, that
hmm,
were working on the project were African, Black African, and very successful. These
exactly.
were brilliant people,
Hmm.
that had, we only had four that were living in Cameroon. So
Hmm.
most of these were Africans that from the diaspora, so that we brought in from our U.S. office or from our Paris office to work on the project. We had 23 people working on this project, and
Oh,
so
wow.
and so it was, these are people that have done multi-million-dollar contracts before. We have customers, across the world, and these are the same people that had been supporting these other customers, much larger companies than MTN. And so it was kind of shocking to them. Like, some of the questions were like, "Oh my goodness, you have a college degree, and this guy has he had two master's degrees." This is the person they were asking, but the questions too. And so I think that they had very low expectations and had a way of dealing with Blacks in a business environment that we had never seen. I'd never seen anything like that. And so I think that there was that cultural clash. There were other issues as well, other than, it's not just racism. I mean, there was some, there were some other issues as well. But I just felt like, one of the things that I've learned out of that experience, and I shared it recently again, but is that there is a very different business mindset on the African continent versus out of Africa, right? So, for instance, in the US, where I started my company in 1999, this is year 20. There's a very win-win business culture, right? So when you enter business arrangement, it's a win. Both parties are expected to benefit from it. But in our environment, particularly in Cameroon, and not to be crude, but I've been known to use crudeness at times.
I know we're going to come to the 700 euro thing. So
one of us is going to get screwed, and it's not going to be me. And so everything is done in anticipation that the other person is going to behave in a dishonest way, right? Exactly. So that's why we have prepaid. Look at the phones, right? So everybody is prepaid. Nobody trusts anybody to pay a bill after the time. Nobody trusts anybody to respect a business agreement. And I think it's very sad because, it really constrains what business relationships can be. And I really still believe in win-win. I really still believe that the best option for all of us is to trust, and this element of trust in business is really critical. It's essential.
Yeah, it is. And, you mentioned that there were cultural clashes apart from, racism. I also got a hint of patriarchy from the lawyer because he came to your office and he goes, "Oh, your office is very well decorated." And it's like, "Oh, we're moving into new digs, And he said, "Becky, you're a very smart girl. Drop this case when you took MTN to court." Like, how did that make you as a woman?
Well, I mean, it's the women in tech thing or women as leaders. It's we get stuff like that, right? I mean, I've had so many of those similar experiences, but I think it was. I will never forget the date. It was April 8th, 2004. I will never forget the conversation because it came from someone whom I thought I knew, and we weren't close friends, but we moved around in the same social circles, and there was no reason for that type of disrespect, but this is something that we encounter as women day in, day out, is this idea that we're decoration, right? And I fight that with all my being, is that we're not decoration. And I hope that lawyer regrets having taken his client down a road that they cannot win. No matter how long it's going to take, we are going to collect our money, every franc of it. So let no one believe for 1 second that it's over and I've let go. No, I still have life before me, and even if I'm gone, those who will stay behind me will continue until we collect every cent of that, of every franc of that money. We earned it, So I'm still hopeful.
So because you also made a statement related to that, how the issues that you had with MTN, how it delayed your company's progress in a way that, can never be replaced. So how did that affect your business? Because obviously you flew in all this staff and all
Yeah,
of
so all of our,
that.
and because we had wanted to do such a good job, right? We wanted to make sure that this was our first large project on the African continent. We'd done some
Exactly.
small projects, primarily as subcontractors in other countries, but this was our first big project, and it was
But you were
sold to
invited at
an.
that. You were
I'm sorry.
invited. You were invited to tender for it at that and you came out, you were the best. You won
Yeah,
outright.
yeah, and actually they had flown out to the U.S. Um,
Yeah.
more than once. They flew out twice. They met
Mm-hmm.
with our customers. They met with our bankers. They did a lot of due diligence ahead of time. They flew to
Yeah.
Paris and
Yeah.
met with our customers there and met our employees there. They flew to Canada where we had an office and met with our
Mm-hmm.
employees there, met with our customers there. And so you can't go through all of that due diligence
Yes.
and then in the end, not respect a commitment. I mean, if you look at the contract, they breached every single article in the contract except for the company name, like everything.
Exactly.
But that's not what this the lawsuit is about. It's like we just want to pay the bill, right?
Exactly.
Pay the bill. That's it.
Yeah.
So pay us for the work that we did. But
Yeah.
it was dramatic because we wanted to prove that we could do this in Africa. We
Yeah.
really put a lot of resources behind this, a lot of financial resources behind this, because when you have 23 people working on a project, you have to pay them even though you're
Yeah.
not getting paid. And the
Yeah.
idea was, okay, we deliver, it works, then we get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were two things that happened. One is that I started to lose focus.
Yeah.
And because I was focused on issues and problems in Cameroon, I
Yeah.
was not focusing on the growth that my business was going through here in the US.
Exactly.
And I was, that's one issue. The second issue is obviously financial, is that,
Yeah.
when you're pulling resources from left and right
Mm-hmm.
to finish a project, you're not investing in the, other opportunities.
Exactly.
And so I think it was very damaging from that respect. But I think the most severe damage that it did was to our momentum and
Yeah.
to our self-esteem, not just mine as an individual, but ours as a company. It's like all of a sudden, we were on such a trajectory of growth and
Yeah.
of success that
Mm-hmm.
that it almost made us question ourselves and say maybe we're not good, and maybe wait. So it really took a lot of time for us to rebuild our self-esteem as a company, to
Yeah.
say, hey, this is not about us, and we still have innovation to create. We still have
Exactly.
customers to serve. And so we need to move forward as a business, and see things in a very positive way. I don't want it to be like, it really did hurt our business, but in the
Yeah.
end, it brought me back to Cameroon, right? So
Yeah.
I was living in the US,
Mm-hmm.
even through the time of the project, and I flew to Cameroon for a 2 week, what I thought would be 2 weeks, because I'm like, oh, I'll just call the CEO, we'll sit down and work something out, right?
Yeah.
I was there for 2 years. So I was actually staying in hotels for 2 full years. And I was so naive. Like every week I would think that no, by next week it'll be settled, it'll be finished. And that
Oh
went
my.
on for 2 years. And so it was really devastating from a business standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
and also from a personal standpoint. But it also allowed me those years to spend with my dad, because after the 2 years, I went back to the US, but I basically moved to Cameroon. I finally got an apartment. And so I was able
Yeah.
to, because of that, spend a
Yeah.
lot more time with my dad,
Yeah.
and really have a much better understanding of the way things work in Cameroon, right? I think some of us that built our careers in the diaspora,
Yeah.
sometimes we look at Cameroon through rose-colored glasses, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
We left the Cameroon that we left and the Cameroon that's there today is not the same Cameroon. And I always tell my brothers and sisters, in a large sense, that live in the diaspora, is that, I understand, and, I'm sure we'll talk about the Anglophone issues and the Southern Cameroon's issues. I totally understand and agree with the pain. But you would be surprised that it's not that black and white. And, there's been so many societal changes that are so profound in our country that are affecting all people of Cameroon. So, it's a debate and it's a discussion that we need to have, because I think that when we leave and we're gone for a long time and we only come back on holiday, because I went back to Cameroon frequently, right? Even when I was away, I went back frequently. In fact, when I was starting my company in Cameroon, when I opened my office in Cameroon, I would fly back and forth all the time. And my parents, my family was there. I thought I understood. I understood nothing. Cameroon schooled me, right? Like, you think you're coming, you're diaspora, you're all this successful, you're on the cover of American magazines, because you're a successful Black woman in tech. And it was so rare back then. You can just imagine, it's still rare today, but you can just imagine 20 years ago, it didn't happen. And so, it's like you start to believe that, you're something, you understand things, so, but I had no clue. I was clueless. I understood nothing about the environment. And so I always think that it's great. I feel blessed to have had those challenges, because it taught me so much about the core of our society, the core of our people, and the real difficulties that we as Cameroonians and Africans have to go through. And, that's a very long answer to but being an entrepreneur in Africa is, you have to be raving mad, because everything is twisted. And it's almost like you're not just fighting to sell and to build your business. You're fighting society that doesn't recognize almost your right to, mais elle pense même qu'elle est qui. Those types of things. It's unbelievable how the society as a whole is built in such a way that it's not supportive of people that want to take risks and want to go into entrepreneurship.
So talking about risk and entrepreneurship and the society, this brings me to the legal and regulatory framework in Africa in general governing the tech ecosystem. And Cameroon is just a special case. But just a bit of background. So Tunisia is the first country on the continent to address this when it erected a Startup Act in 2018. Though some Tunisians will tell you, more still needs to be done, of course, in implementing this. But some will say that this is low-hanging fruit and the government needs to work in key areas such as providing a conducive business environment through tax breaks, funding, and otherwise. So you've kind of highlighted some of your experience doing business in Cameroon, but what has been your experience with the chairing ActivSpaces, which encourages tech entrepreneurs with the 2 hubs that you chair across Cameroon, and also working with the African Business Angels Network?
Okay, so ActivSpaces, which stands for African Center for Technology and Ventures, we started first in Boya because, as many people know, the Boya has traditionally been the epicenter of the tech ecosystem in Cameroon. It was the earliest to have startups and to build itself as a community. And I always say we call it Silicon Mountain, but Silicon Mountain is not a location. And Silicon Mountain is a community of people that are trying to build this tech ecosystem and recognize the need to have a community and not just individual success. And I think that's what's special about what we call Silicon Mountain, is that there's a real community and a real ecosystem that's actually being built, rather than, there's one successful entrepreneur here and then there's one successful entrepreneur there. And it slowly, the ActivSpaces Boya and that Silicon Mountain community colonized the entrepreneurs in Douala and adopted the Douala entrepreneurs into that community. And so we can talk about a larger technology ecosystem in Cameroon. But one thing that must be clear is that this ecosystem is centered in Boya, our former capital, the former capital of the entire country. It's still centered there. The problems that we've had within the last couple of years have obviously had a tremendous negative impact. But it's still, there's a spirit there. There's a spirit in that environment that I think that's what's going to make us succeed. I also chair an organization called AfriLabs, and AfriLabs is a network of hubs across the African continent. AfriLabs has 158 member hubs. Of course, ActivSpaces is a member across 45 countries, and supporting a community of over 500,000 entrepreneurs. And so I talk and I see entrepreneurs very regularly, and the same problems that we complain about in Cameroon, they'll complain about even in Tunisia, they'll complain about in Egypt, they'll complain about in South Africa. And sometimes we laugh because I'm like, you see all these programs, and when you listen to politicians, I was recently in a country, I won't name it because I don't want to get in trouble. I get in too much trouble already. But I was recently in a country, and I was hearing their second in command in the country saying, very proudly, like, all these things they're doing for the tech entrepreneurs. And I was with some entrepreneurs from that country, and they're like, what country is he talking about? So there's the language and what the politicians are saying and claiming, and then there's the reality on the ground. But there's definitely, and I can see it, there's definitely an effort on the part of some government to improve the environments, because they recognize how powerful technology can be and how transformative technology can be for their own economy. So don't fight, it's like killing the golden goose, right?
Exactly.
So it's some countries have recognized the need. Now, amongst those that have recognized it, and where there's some political will, the implementation is still problematic, right? So we need both the political will, positive policies, and proper implementation. So I think that this is we need to get all of three of those combined. And if I have one message to convey to African governments, even the spies from Etudi, I would say that talk to the entrepreneurs. You would be very surprised that no one from the Cameroon government has ever spoken to me about technology enabling environment in Cameroon, ever. It's never happened. As a matter of fact, we have never had a high-level official visit ActivSpaces, either Boyan or Douala. And so they sit and they create these policies, and some of them are well-intentioned. It's not, I'm not even, like, it's not everything they do that's bad. It's like they're really trying in some respects, but what they're doing and their plans are so ill-conceived because they don't really answer the problems that we're having. And so you can't sit in your tower, in your ivory tower in Yaoundé, and then decide without talking to us what we need. So I really encourage more dialogue, even with people that you may not like so much. I really, I really encourage dialogue, and I'm opening. I'm saying it officially and openly. I'm open. I'm open to having these discussions with any member of the Cameroon government on how we can be the next Tunisia.
Yeah.
It's not something that costs. It's not about money. You would be
No.
so surprised that we don't need a budget for this, which is
No.
probably why we're not having it.
No.
Because if there's no budget, nobody wants to get involved in it because you don't manage money and you're not interested. So
Yeah.
we really, there's so many things that can be done that don't involve cost, that would really improve our business environment, and especially for technology and entrepreneurs.
Yeah, but one can comment and say that the way our political lives in Africa is run is very much rent-seeking. So unfortunately for us, until we have those leaders who are looking more to make change than to line up their pockets with lots more money, we're going to still have the struggle. But anyways, we are going to keep a positive mindset, like you said. So let's keep reinforcing that message. Now, social media, Rebecca, is reinforcing political power structures in Africa more than it's challenging them. I read
I saw that study, that article in Forbes.
Yeah. So
I saw that. I'm not sure that I agree. I'm not sure that I'm in complete agreement with them. I think that
there could be an argument for against this, because you find countries such as Tanzania and Uganda moving to tax social media. So carry on. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that social media has been extremely powerful on the continent, on the entire continent. You can't, and obviously, and for many Africans, it's been the first time that they could express themselves freely to a large group of people. This is the first time. And so this is the first time that Africans could say, hey, oh, by the way, I don't like you. I don't like the president, and there's like this freedom, this newfound freedom, that governments themselves have not been comfortable with. And so they've managed it very poorly. And, we've seen that all the internet shutdowns. I think it's out of fear. Governments are shutting the internet down, not just to assert power, but because they're fearful. This is something that they don't even understand. I think how many of our politicians use social media, really use it to communicate and have these dialogues and have these conversations that are sometimes very hard. How many? So we're I think they're just fearful of it. They use it for marketing and selling their messages and things like that. We saw about the Facebook, the Facebook scandals, where there was some advertising and some content and some fake accounts that were supporting particular presidential candidates in elections. And so they're trying to use and manipulate social media for their own needs, but they're doing so without understanding social media. And I think that's why that's where I disagree with that article, is that they're trying to control and to use it as their tool, but I don't think they're being very successful at it, to be honest. I think that if they really spent some time on social media, they would understand that whatever they're doing is not working.
Yeah. So we've already established, that the legal and regulatory structures on the continent do create a lot of challenges, especially for investors. But you had an interview with Andile Masuko on African Tech Roundup.
Wow, you were way back in your research.
Yeah, I did. And you explained your annoyance at foreign aid money flooding Africa's tech scene, as seen with Mark Zuckerberg's support of Andela, not as a business investment, but kind of aid funding of sorts. So, and this was well before the Jumia is not Africa, your Jumia is not Africa hashtag that went viral. And just for a bit of background, so there was this other gentleman that came by the name of TMS Ruger. He weighed in and he actually showed proof that Jumia changed their legal form to become a German stock corporation from 1st of January 2019 on Twitter this year. So which means they actually were going on the stock exchange markets. They were doing the IPO when they had already declared that they were no longer an African company. So
they were never an African company. I mean, they moved. No. I mean, I hope that that's clear. Jumia started in Berlin. It didn't start anywhere on the African continent. And we can talk about that a little bit. I didn't want to interrupt you because the other topic, which is very related to why the Jumia is not African went viral, is about funding for African startups. We have a problem. And there was a study done by Village Capital, an American firm, that said that 93% of the funding that went to East African startups, I think 2 years ago, went to foreign founders.
Oh la la.
And you can look at it's been going around. There's a report that was put together by someone that works for GSMA, but that where he listed the startups that have raised more than that have raised more than $1 million so far in 2019. And
Wow.
you would really see how many of those founders are not from Africa. And so we still have this issue of the largest amounts of funds are going to foreign startups and not African founders. And that's why I have such an issue with this Jumia portraying itself as an African startup. You know, being an African entrepreneur, and we just had that conversation, is so incredibly difficult. It's so hard. I mean, you know, just to start a business and then, you know, imagine trying to raise funding and then, you know, I don't look like what a successful tech entrepreneur looks like. You know, everybody's talking about, oh, the next Mark Zuckerberg. Well, you know, and when they're looking for the next Mark Zuckerberg, they're looking for somebody that physically looks like him. They're looking for a white man, you know, and so it's very difficult to break that and to say, hey, by the way, there are successful businesses, successful entrepreneurs that don't look like Mark Zuckerberg. And it's such a battle. And then you have two French guys being hired by a company called Rocket Berlin.
Yes.
So Rocket Berlin, Rocket Internet, sorry, I call Rocket Berlin is their Twitter handle. Rocket Internet is in the business of launching copycats of companies across the world, right? So they launch brands, they create their brands in Berlin, and then they decide, okay, we're going to launch in this country and that country and that country, you know, mostly Latin America, Asia, and more recently, Africa. And so that's how Jumia started, right? And what they did is they launched a number of brands like Kemu, Lamudi, Carmudi, Jovago. Those were not African specific brands. Those are brands that they launch across the world. And as a matter of fact, if you go and research and look, you will find that some of those brands exist today with their original name. So then they decide to launch some of those brands on the African continent. And it's not as if they launched from one particular country in Africa. You know, so Rocket Berlin hired two guys as co-founders, right?
Yes,
So
two Nigerian gentlemen. Yeah.
No. French guys, white guys.
Okay.
Co-founders, right?
Yeah,
Rocket Berlin hired two guys in Germany, but that worked out of an office in Paris as co-founders. And if you want, you can go to the Rocket Internet website and you can apply to be a co-founder for one of their companies. It's a job. It's not an African, it's not a founder. It's not somebody that created the business. So, and Rocket Berlin, Rocket Internet, provides the funding, provides the business plan, so all they're doing is going and open an office or opening a subsidiary. And so in that, they hired they hired people to launch their companies in various African countries, including Nigeria, including Cameroon. But it wasn't like they hired guys in Nigeria that then opened the rest of the African. No. So you have some that were African that they hired to start their business, their brand, to launch a brand on the continent. But you have white guys, like you have in Nigeria. Some of the brands were led by white guys. They weren't led by locals, right? So, and it was like that in all countries. In Cameroon, it was a young French lady. I mean, she must have been like 22 years old, first real job, that launched it out of my conference room. So I know exactly how it works. You know, I invited her to start. I was trying to help her and support her because I knew Rocket Internet, and I thought that it would be a great infusion to have a Rocket subsidiary in Cameroon, because it would create competition and, you know, buzz, and you know, our other entrepreneurs would see how the Germans do it. So it was never, and that's why it's clear that it had never been African. So they moved their headquarters. This is the African operations, used to be called Africa Internet Group. They were based in Paris. They hired from Paris, and they controlled and managed everything from Paris. And then they moved their headquarters from Paris to Dubai. So at no point has Jumia ever had a group level office on the African continent.
Right. Because I remember covering this story when Jumia just started in Africa, and then there were because we usually, at the time I worked at Vox Africa, and then we usually got our press from Reuters, and the press releases were all saying that the founders were these two Nigerian gentlemen and that they were planning to expand into Egypt. And I was like, wow, this is wonderful. And
that first of all, they were talking about Jumia Nigeria only, right? Even when those two worked in Jumia Nigeria, they did not work. They didn't have any influence or any say on any of the activities for Jumia anywhere else on the continent. And we call it Jumia because in 2016 they were really struggling with all of these various brands, Kemu, Lamudi, Karmudi, etc., and decided to consolidate all of the brands under the name Jumia only on the African continent. So the other brands continued elsewhere, but for their African operations, they decided to brand everything under Jumia. And then, as you saw, when they decided to launch their IPO, they then registered Jumia Group instead of Africa Internet Group. So that's the change. They didn't really change the location of their headquarters. They were always registered as a German company.
Oh, wow. That's pretty interesting, because one would never have, thought of all these background things until your hashtag came out. I've always thought Jumia was African. So when I was reading through the messages and seeing all the tweets and seeing people adding to it, I was just like, wow, okay, this is.
And I think that everybody's some people were saying that, well, here, why don't we just take credit for this being an African company that launches an IPO on Wall Street? Shouldn't we just be happy about that? But knowing how Jumia functions, and knowing how badly they're managed, they raised $800 million US. Can you imagine that? $800 million, and they have had losses in excess of $1 billion in losses. Wow. So if this is not what a successful African startup looks like, we have successful African startups. They don't lose $1 billion US after raising 800 million. They don't. We would never be allowed to as Africans, right? We would never be allowed to raise that kind of money and then lose $1 billion and then go around saying, "Oh, we're successful." It just wouldn't happen. But two white guys, they can do that, and they get away with it. using the Africa brand. And that's yeah.
I mean, some people would argue that, okay, that Jumia, perhaps or generally other companies that are launched in Africa by Europeans, they might be anti-registering them in Africa, given that the legal structures and regulatory structures are not that very strong. So wouldn't it be understandable that what works best for your business is what you spring for in terms of registering?
I have absolutely no problem with them being registered in Germany.
Yeah.
No problem whatsoever. I do have a problem with them not having a single African on their group management team. I do have a problem with them not having a single group office on the African continent. I do have a problem with them not having a single African engineer on their team. They decided to create and to build their whole engineering center in Portugal. I have a problem with all of that. I have a problem with them doing all that and then coming back and saying, oh, we're African. What's African about you other than your customers? Tell us. The technology is not created in Africa. The technology, it's not the strategies are not decided upon in Africa. It's not managed from Africa. What is African other than the customer base? What is African about Jumia? Because they sell to us, so does Techno. Techno is a telephone brand. It's exclusively for the African continent. Yeah. You can't buy Techno anywhere else in the world. But I don't think that Techno would go around saying they were African. They're Chinese. It's the same business model. So I think it's fine if they want to do business in Africa, but don't claim to be an African startup. It's just the most ridiculous thing.
Yeah. So some would highlight that, okay, maybe Jumia's attitude also equally, points to another African problem. Take Andela, for example. They take the best, developers, and when those developers get enough experience, then they move abroad to countries like Canada, where they get more pay. And I came across someone who has a startup here teaching like Africans how to code and do that. But then they've become reluctant to do that because they then say that when they train Africans to work in Africa and they gain the skills, then they sell them to, Western companies at a cheaper rate, and then they lose a job from out here. So what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are that if the environments, obviously on the African continent, first of all, that excuse as far as hiring, we have enough engineers on the African continent that would be able to support a Jumia operation, right? So that's not the issue here. And if they wanted, they could go sign a contract with Andela, and I'm sure Andela would be happy to take their and do the engineering. But I think it goes beyond that. I think when I bring people into my company, I have about 15 interns starting in Douala on Monday.
Wow. I hope they're not from your though.
When we do that, we don't do it because we expect them to stay with us. I've had hundreds of Africans that have come through AppsTech, and we call them alumni. They've worked some for shorter periods, some for very long periods, but they're all part of, for me, when they go out and they go on and they're successful, wherever they are, whatever they're doing, I'm proud of them because I feel like I contributed to that. I don't want to feel like, oh yeah, I trained you, and so you have to stay. If you can do better, go do better. I will train the next person. It's fine. Yeah. I think we shouldn't get bogged down in the impression that, we have to hold and keep these young people. I want them to grow and develop and be the best they can be wherever that might be, even if it's not with me, right? And so I'm not investing in them only for me, but I'm investing in these young people so that they can do for Africa. And some will leave, because it's better for them. But when they go, they're still African, aren't they? Right? And whether they're in Canada or in the US or in Europe, they're still African. And so they're still carrying our brand as successful engineers. And so I think that that's still positive. And I will never stop supporting young people that want to learn how to get involved in technology, whether it's through one of the organizations I'm involved in or or my company. And I will never feel like if they leave, that I've lost something. I think the world gains something. And I think that if we look at it that way, then, we won't worry about, coming and leaving. And, look at if the conditions are good enough and they can support their families, most Africans want to stay. They want to stay home. Like
Yeah.
this impression that everybody just wants to go, it's not it's not the truth. That's not what I see. What I see is people sometimes becoming so frustrated with the conditions under which they have to live that they want to leave. But it's not, if you have a good job and you're working as in your field as an engineer, your first reaction is not to take off and go to Canada.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm very positive, and I think faut donner sans compter. Is what they say in French, is if you're going to invest in young people, you're doing it for them. You're not doing it for you, right?
Okay. Yeah, so I've got a question here, Rebecca, from one of our audience members called Botti. So Botti is asking, to build a company, you have to have the right partners, like you said. So where and how did you find yours for ActivSpaces, and how did you then know that it would work out with them in the long term?
Okay, so in our lingo, we call them founders versus partners, co-founders. But and this is true not just in business, but also in personal relationships. You have to have common values. What is your value system, right? What are your principles? Is there integrity, right? That's what you look for in somebody that you're going to start either an organization with or a business with. And so, ActivSpaces, I was very blessed years ago. I was to have met an American guy called Bill Zimmerman. There's Valerie Colong. There's so many people that were involved. Ebot Tabi, so many people that were involved very early on in trying to take this vision and make a reality out of it. I'm one of those people that I can think through and plan things, but I really, really, really need people around me that are going to carry it out and do the day to day. Like we talk about African Business Angels Network. What we did is we created, and again, these are like-minded individuals that share values and principles and are willing to come together for good. When you have that kind of group together, it's an unbeatable team. And what you can accomplish with people like that is amazing things, right? You can just go beyond what anybody expects because you really share the same, the same, I guess, passion for doing things properly. And so I think that's what I look for. I have my co-founder here for one of my businesses. I don't know if you can see this, but this is ActivSpaces, which is one of my companies here in the US. And I have my co-founder who's here. His name is Leslie Tita. He's from Cameroon. And I met Leslie when I was mentoring him. He had a startup. And I met Leslie, and so he came to the US, and he had this idea, and he had the vision, and he talked to me about it, and I decided to invest in it, and then now I'm so involved that he's considering me his co-founder, and I'm grateful for that. So it's really important. But Leslie is like a brother to me. We really share this passion and the same values. We're very different. We're so different. Sometimes we can fight day in, day out. I mean, but we can argue. But fight is a big word. It's argue but I think we're very complementary. And I would say the same thing for all the other organizations or businesses that I'm involved in. the people that are running the businesses on a daily basis, or the organizations when they're a lot of nonprofits, are people that share the same passions, share the same value system as I do.
Okay, so we've got loads and loads of comments coming through here, Rebecca. So we'll just read them very quickly so that you can hear some of them. So Botti, that you just responded to a question, Botti, I hope you got that response there. So Jumia is not African. Those people have always wanted to use our name to shine without dealing with us directly. Colonial mindset, she goes. And then we have a Bacham Santa Emene who says, a country's richest lies in the citizens. Who will tell them? And we've got Simon Munzu. Simon Munzu is actually watching it, he says.
So, oh my God. Hi. I'm so
So we have Bamai Namata, who is saying that Jumia will be making real African entrepreneurs be feeling like they can't raise capital. Horrible.
Yeah.
And someone here saying G Kings is saying we need a Paul Kagame. And Asheri Meredith responding to G King saying you can be one. And G King's response, I'm trying my best. So we have Mbole Ekane who's saying, but as Africans, what can we do? What can we do to the same thing as Jumia? Why is it always foreigners that are winning big time in Africa? We have a plethora of techies and business people. Africans are very cursed.
We're not cursed. We're not cursed. I hear you, and I hear you, and it could be very discouraging. But what can we do is we have to start talking about it. That's the beginning, right? Is to start having this conversation. You know, some of these very difficult conversations, people don't want to have the conversation. That's what I'm here for, right? That's my role that I've given myself, is like where people don't want to tread because maybe it's too hot to tread there. I'm ready to tread there. And I'm really glad that, you know, maybe the Jumia is not African has kind of raised awareness for this problem that we have about African founders not getting funded. I'm in a couple of different WhatsApp groups where there are a lot of African investors, most of which, unfortunately, are not African. And I think that's part of the problem. You know, part of our problem is that Africans are not investing in Africans. You know, and that's the reason we created the African Business Angels Network. A business angel is somebody that's taking their own, you know, personal money and investing in an early stage business, right? That's how Silicon Valley developed. You know, Mark Zuckerberg didn't go to a VC; he got angel investment. And so, what we're trying to do is encourage encourage Africans to invest in Africans and help them. And so create a framework within which they can do this. So African Business Angels Network has been encouraging the creation of angel networks across the continent. There are so many new angel networks that were created only in 2019, especially in Francophone Africa. It's been wonderful to see that you have these individuals that have a little bit of extra money and have decided that they're going to entrust that money to young startup entrepreneurs.
Exactly.
And I'm seeing the question about the Nigerian.
So
they created the generator. Oh, that is amazing. You know, that was amazing. I saw that. I tweeted about it. It is, you know, so you have this young man in Nigeria that created in Nigeria a generator that functions with water as power.
Yes.
Wow, what ingenuity. But, you know, I see that ingenuity so often. I'm involved as a judge on the various competitions. We have one that's out of the UK with the Royal Academy for Engineering called the Africa Prize for Engineering. The innovation that we see, these young people and what they do with nothing. These they can do so much with nothing. And goodness gracious, we need to support them. And so that's why it's so important to create a framework, because some people want to invest and they don't know how. It's like they don't know how it works, right? They don't know the mechanics of it. And that's why we create these angel networks. These angel networks are there to accompany the investors themselves, It's an association of investors, really, just what it is, like an investment club, right? So you get together, you look at various deals, and if you don't know how it works, somebody else knows how it works, and together you decide to pool some money and put into a startup. And we have to start doing that, because we can't sit back and complain about the Jumias that raised, $800 million while we raised nothing, and then not encourage and then not have Africans invest in Africans. And so I think that's the first solution. The other one is there are blind spots that investors have. An investor that's in Silicon Valley that wants to invest in Africa still has what a successful entrepreneur looks like. You can't change that. Even Black people in America have a problem raising money. It's not just Africans, right?
Yeah.
So we're a double victim, because you're foreigner, you're a foreigner. So that added to all the things that don't look like success, and all the other startups that look like success, that are right next to them, where the founder looks like them. I think that those are some of the things that create issues. But I think we first need to bring up that we first need to raise awareness and start having the conversations with those investors, and say, hey, by the way, you may have a blind spot here. Do you realize that all these startups that you've invested in Africa don't have African founders? Those types of conversations need to happen. And I think that's the beginning.
Yeah, I have a comment here from Bola Ekane, who says, you're right. I believe those who usually do startup businesses are from the diaspora, but businesses cannot depend on them alone. The next problem is that most Africans in Africa don't have enough money to invest. So it's like a catch-22. We've heard problems about the banks where they don't give you any line of credit because you don't have a land title to give as collateral, or you don't have someone to back you up. So how does an entrepreneur who doesn't have any money, because even angel networks would require you to give some sort of collateral for them to be able to give you their hand?
No. Okay, so no, it's completely equity. These are not loans, right? Okay. So an angel investor, it's incredibly risky for the angel investor. There's no collateral. What you're doing is getting equity. You're getting shares in the company. Generally, we as African Business Angels Network, in the training that we give investors, say that this should never exceed more than 15% of the business, of the shares in the business. So what we're saying is that, okay, we're going to give you $10,000, right? And we're going to take 5% of your company, right? Or, something like that. So it's generally negotiated, but it's not a loan. And these angel investors could lose everything, which is why it's entrepreneurs and startups also need to better prepare themselves. As part of the conversation we had earlier, where you have somebody that has this great idea, great concept, and goes to investor with this idea and thinks that the investor is going to invest in the idea. My friend, that money that I earned through my blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
You want me to just hand it to you, right? You have nothing. You have no product. You have no knowledge. You don't have any experience building a company.
Yeah.
And you just want me to just hand over the money. God. So I think what we want entrepreneurs to do in order to be prepared for the funding that comes, right, is we want them to have a product. Don't come to us with an idea. We don't fund ideas. We fund businesses. And so if you don't have a product that we can test and that we can see, does this thing work? Don't come for funding, right? You're not ready for the funding at that point. You're going to have to struggle a little bit more, maybe find some friends to support you and help you build your product. Once your product is ready, then you still have to have a plan. How are you going to monetize your product? How are you going to make money on the product? You know, all of those things need to be thought through and prepared so that when we come to you, it's like, what are you just creating a product because you think it's fun? Or is there a real problem that you're bringing a solution to? So
Yeah.
all of those things need to be thought through. We support entrepreneurs by helping them put this together
Yeah.
through these tech hubs, right? So all the tech hubs that are members of AfriLabs, that's what ActivSpaces does. Is ActivSpaces takes you, the entrepreneur, you have a product, we help you and we support you by helping you build a real business plan. When we say business plan, we're not talking about a 20-page document. I hate those, right? We're talking about what is your business model? How are you going to make money from this product? And so, and we do it for free, by the way,
Oh,
right?
wow.
This is not, ActivSpaces is an association. It's a nonprofit organization, as are the vast majority of tech hubs across the continent. There was a report that came out earlier this year that pointed to about over 600 tech hubs on the African continent. Those that are a member of AfriLabs, as I said, there are about 158. There are 158 now, 45 countries. Most of those hubs are nonprofits, and most of them are there just to support the entrepreneur. You know, they're funded like people like me. Some of them are funded by corporations. Some of them are funded by foundations, and their sole purpose is to support the entrepreneur and help them be a success.
Oh, wow.
That's all. That's it. There's no hidden agenda. That's it. And so what we do is we provide an environment that's physical. So you can come and work out of our two centers, the one in Boya and then the one in Douala. And you can come and work out of there. You have an internet connection. And then you have access to all the support and all the training that we provide our entrepreneurs. And if you want, you can even enter our incubation program. And our incubation program is much more intensive and gives you it. And all it is to give you tools. We can't say whether or not you're going to be successful, right?
Of course.
We can't, but we can say, okay, these are the tools that will help you be the most successful you can be. And these this is how you can present your business to an investor in such a way that the investor will want to put their money in and will trust you with it, because we know that it will be years and years and years before we ever see any result from that investment. And so, so that's part of the beauty and the why technology hubs are so important in Africa, because in the US, in Europe, you can start your business out of your parents' house, right? The basement. Everybody's like, oh, we started in the garage and everything like that. But we don't have those. You don't have an internet connection in your house. You don't have the parents that can, help you write your plan. And so I think that that's the role that tech hubs have in Cameroon is really being a community center supporting entrepreneurs. And we're doing this across the continent. And as I said, we have a community of over 500,000 entrepreneurs that are supported through this network.
Okay. So, Rebecca, I'll just quickly read this comment, ask you one quick question. We can go to the other part of this interview. So, right, we have another from Botti who's saying, right, so we from the African population in foreign countries need to mature enough, need to refuse to send money to the family for gifts, but rather for investment. In 2018, we sent around $60 million via Western Union. We need to use that money to build, not consume. So that follows with a question then now from a gentleman by the name of Kinder Bueno. Rebecca, is there a network or group of mentorship where people from the diaspora can be supported in terms of building something on the continent?
I think that that's a key issue is how can we leverage the money from the diaspora and build businesses with it. So one interesting thing that we found is that for instance, in our environment in Cameroon, we have a few in our group of Cameroon Angels Network. But what we've discovered is that we have like-minded Cameroonians that are sitting in Silicon Valley and want to invest. They just don't know how. And so we're serving as that conduit between them and the startup, so that we're on the ground. We can see these entrepreneurs, right? And we can touch them and we can see their progress, which it's very difficult to follow a startup when you're located overseas, right? So sometimes you send your money and these guys, they take off with the money, and so it's true, it happens, unfortunately. So there's also this issue of trust, and so I think that's why I so believe in structuring our ecosystem. I really think it's key. I think that, relationships between business angels and tech hubs, we're all doing the same thing, right? In the end, we want entrepreneurs to succeed, right? Yeah. So I think that what's really essential is that we create these relationships. And I'm very proud that this is something that we'll be announcing very soon, is between AfriLabs, the hubs, and ABAN, the African Business Angels Network. We have created a program called Catalyst to support startups in Africa and support the angel investors, because it's so difficult to be an angel investor. There are so few angel investors that we really want to encourage it. And so what we've done is that we've created a program through which we're raising a pool of money that will be, kept and managed by ABAN and AfriLabs. ABAN is a Mauritius entity. It's a nonprofit foundation. AfriLabs is also a foundation. Our office for AfriLabs is in Abuja, Nigeria. Yeah. And so what those two teams have come together and done is create this program. It's like, okay, how can we work together? And so in order to support the entrepreneur, support the hub, and support the angel investor, we have this matching program. We're raising money that will be managed at the level of the African Business Angels Network. And when an angel investor decides to invest in a startup that is in a hub that's a member of AfriLabs, you see, we're trying to keep the structure. Yes. Then the pool will match that investment. So let's say I only have $5,000, right? The startup needs more. And so what this pool would do is then match the amount of money that the angel investor is putting in and into the startup. There's a very small percentage that goes to the hub, because we want the hubs to track the progress for the startup and report back to the program, report back to the investor. And so this is a program that I think will really encourage angel investment, will really support the startups and support the hubs at the same time. And we're hoping to announce it within the next couple of weeks.
Okay. So a quick question. Somebody is asking, how do they become an angel investor with ABAN?
So ABAN is a network of networks, but ABAN can help you and support you in creating a network in your country if you don't have one. Or even if there is one and you want to create your own, I mean, the more the merrier. We have 2 angel networks that I know of in Cameroon, formal angel networks. There may be some informal ones, but in other countries, there are many. In some countries, there are none. And so if you go to abanangels.org, there's the contact information there. They will tell you if there's already a network in your country. If there's not a network, they will encourage you and support you in creating a network in your country.
Okay, thank you for that, Rebecca. So let's go to the second part of this. We're coming back to Cameroon now. So just to highlight one thing, I realized you're very bilingual. I noticed that when you brought up the issue of the crise de devise, I didn't even know what crise de devise was before I understood the currency crisis. My French is, if I could put it in French, en déchéance, but my French is not so good, so I was quite taken with how bilingual you are. But how did you keep up your French being in America?
Well, I mean, I went to French school, right? And I think that puts me in a very unique situation because I came from a very Anglophone activist home,
Yeah.
and I spoke English at home. That's why I have an American accent. It's not because of the years I spent in the US. It's because my mother is American. And so
Oh,
I
wow.
learned English with this accent, right? And but they sent me to French school. So I studied in French up
Mm-hmm.
until I left at the age of 14 and went to the US. So I went to Dominique Savio as for primary school and went to Collège Liberman for secondary school. So that's
Oh,
where I spoke French. And I'd never written a letter in English until I arrived in the US. So yeah, but the accent is because of my mom. It's not because I
wow.
spent too many years here. So
That's quite
yeah,
interesting.
there's some things that are actually easier for me in French, like uh, I end up like counting in French, and those things that you learn very early, I do in French. But
Yeah.
but my intellect um, is English. It's hard for me sometimes to express exactly what I want to say when I'm speaking in French, and it's harder for me for sure.
Wow. So coming back to Cameroon now, the currency crisis, the crise de devises that befell the country recently, and we saw the communique that was sent out by, is it GMAP or GMAT? And in one of your tweets, you advised that if the government could solve this problem by encouraging and installing more mobile money services. But we know that with most governments, not necessarily Cameroons, they're moving out to tax mobile money. And you already mentioned earlier about, killing the golden goose. So what other solutions can be visited to resolve this currency crisis in Cameroon? Because business are suffering.
Yeah, they are, and I suggested also that they allow visa on arrival,
Oh, yes.
and so many countries get so much of their foreign currency by accepting dollars and euros to
Mhm.
pay visas when people arrive, right? So it doesn't mean that you don't have a visa, and it doesn't mean that you have to allow the person into the country. It
Mhm.
just means that when they arrive, they can get their visa right there, and you generate foreign currency. There's so many people that don't visit countries that don't have that have visa requirements. Yeah, because they're like, hey, I have a few days. Oh, get on a plane, go to Nairobi. They can do that, and they get there and they pay for a visa. And it's funny because Kenya, Tanzania, some of these countries, they don't take their own currency
Mm.
to pay for a visa, which I
Yeah.
always found weird. But it's a
Yeah.
way for them to get this currency. And so I
Mhm.
think that's one way of helping this crisis, and also getting more people to visit like Cameroon. I mean, it's so difficult to come into the country
Yeah.
that sometimes people, you go and go, we know it, right? Some of our Anglophone brothers, because they
Yeah.
have an Anglophone name, they even get the visa and then they land and then they tell them you can't come in. So
Mm.
what difference does it make if you just fly in and then get your visa on arrival? So I really encourage the Cameroon government to get away from that visa ahead of time, do visa on arrival,
Mhm.
at least for all Africans.
Mhm.
I think that's a great step. A lot of African countries are moving towards that. And
Mhm.
the other thing about the crise de devise is that if we look at it,
Mhm.
who is sending the most money outside?
Mhm.
So when we buy weapons
Mhm.
to fight a war,
Mm.
are we paying in CFA or are we paying in dollars?
Dollars, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
So when we get these huge government contracts, how much of the money is actually private sector? You would see that most of the money that leaves in most of the currency that we have at BIAC is actually used by the government. I
Mhm.
don't know what the numbers are, but look at the volume. And we import, by the way, we import our fuel,
Wow.
right? And we
Honorable.
pay for that. Oh yes, and we pay for that in US dollars, right? So there are a whole bunch of issues
Mhm.
that are interrelated, and we cannot say that you can solve this currency issue without resolving the Anglophone issue. It's not possible, because look at all of the foreign currency that came in when we sold all the agricultural products that came in from Northwest and Southwest. That brought in additional foreign reserves, right? So our foreign reserves were increased by exports. Those exports have now reduced significantly. And because of the issue, our imports have increased because we're now purchasing more weapons to fight this war. So you have this, and until that crisis is resolved, we will have a foreign currency crisis. You can't not fix one aspect and then expect the other to be resolved.
Yes. Oh, wow. That's very interesting, because one wouldn't have thought of that. But just continuing on that banking thing, I just thought there's one fact to put out there. Maybe you as a business person, you've encountered it, because I was reading a report from doing business in Cameroon. And he was saying something like, in Central Africa in general, those aged over 15 and above, just 10% of the population is actually banking, which means that there's a huge lag in financial knowledge amongst adults. So adding on this kind of issue, so it makes it difficult for people to see where the problems could arise and how they can.
But see, I think that we can leapfrog that. I don't think that having a bank account equals being banked, right? People use mobile money more so than anywhere else. In the percentage of Africans that are using mobile money exceeds that on any other continent, right? And so I think that we still have to start unthinking the traditional bank where you go in and deposit money and they never give it to you and they charge you a fortune every month for the privilege of keeping your money in their bank. We don't have to follow that model. We can have our own model as an African model. And it could be linked to blockchain, right? It could be linked to so many other ways of thinking about money and how money changes hands that doesn't need to go through a bank. You know, let's go back into our tradition and see how we exchanged money, you know, and how can we replicate that using technology? I think that's what we need to look at, is that how can we use our own social ways? Look at these tontines and the jangi, you know, that's how that there's such an important component of finance in our countries, yet they're not considered. Like when these people, because they're sitting in Washington, D.C. or Paris doing their studies and their reports, they don't see, because they don't understand how we function, right? And so I think that that's why it's so important that the decisions be made on the continent, for the continent, by Africans themselves, because we know the best solutions for our problems, which may not be problems that somebody can see or when they're sitting in another situation. Like I was in a judging recently, and I was sitting in London, and there was this startup and talking about foreign exchange. There's this one startup that is able to, you know how like people do currency swaps, right? So you go in a WhatsApp group and you're like, hey, you know, I have Naira, I need dollars, you know, and so it's very scary because you're having to send money through PayPal or something like that. And you don't know that the person will really give your person the money on the other end. And so they've formalized that, and they've created an app to do this currency swap, which is brilliant. It's brilliant. But who else would know that? If you're not in Africa and you're not having that problem,
exactly,
how would you sit in London or Berlin and understand that this is a real problem and this is a real solution? So I think that when we look at banking, and I think that if we decide on what we want for our financial systems, they won't look like banking overseas. You know, what I would like is for us to open our minds, you know, and not feel like anything that we do has to be a copy of what's done overseas.
Please. Yeah.
So, those, we just really need to think outside of the box. And I, to be honest, that's one of the reasons I don't believe in the Jumia model. It's because Jumia, do you know that the CEO of Jumia recently said that Africa has no retail? He went on television and said Africa has no retail because they don't see it. For them, retail is a supermarket, right?
Yeah.
That's why their logo is a supermarket cart. Tell me how many Africans have ever seen a supermarket cart? How many? How many? We don't shop like that, right? We don't shop that way. And so they've created this logo of something that Africans can't recognize, right? Except for the very elite that they can't recognize. And created a model that Africans can't find themselves in. We don't go to supermarkets aisle down the aisle and then put things in a basket and then go to the cash register, give our credit card and pay and leave. That's not how we buy.
No.
And so I think that's why their model is so twisted. And I think that because they did it from Europe and not from Africa, they have no understanding of what we need. And I think that's why I'm so glad that I now live in Cameroon. I just happen to be in the US right now, but because it's really important to be there and live there and understand the problems that we have with electricity. There's so many problems that people on the other side of the world, they can't imagine, they can't understand, so and so I think that having this ability to build our own solutions that may not look anything like anything that's designed anywhere else in the world, it's really important. And I'm pretty confident that our financial systems won't look anything like what they look like in Europe. And and I don't think that, I think that we just need to be allowed to build our own.
Certainly. So the governance situation in Cameroon, moving on from that crisis, the visa currency crisis, is deteriorating with the Anglophone crisis, the locking up of opposition leaders, Maurice Kamto, Michelle Doki for speaking out, someone in the legal profession, journalists in prison. The government has been taking initiative by creating commissions, but not all the key people have been involved. So do you think that if women were engaged in those discussions, things would have taken a different turn?
I'm not sure. Because, it's not just taking part in discussion, it's having decision-making power. I think that, the government, whether there are women in government today, I'm not sure that they do any more for us than the men do or don't do. We do need dialogue, but I don't think it's a question of women and men. Obviously, there is a problem in our government, in our parliament, in our Senate, the number of women leaders is too low. But that's not, I don't think that that's why we have the current problem. I think that we have the current problem because we have really bad leadership. We have a government, a president that's been in power for too long. And, after a while, it's like you need to move forward and you need to let other people make their own mistakes. Perhaps because you're so experienced, la force de l'expérience, because you're so experienced, you feel like you can't let go, because if you let go, then, those kids, they're going to mess it up. We might just mess it up.
Yeah.
But we need to go through that. We need to move forward and because when you have such stagnation, like you have the same system and it doesn't change, you can't expect different results just because you have different people, right? Because you have a few extra women in there, all of a sudden, the system is all better. No, not at all. I think that, we need a new government completely, I think. Please don't get me in too much trouble.
No.
It's because I always say, c'est notre papa, right? So we want him to go rest. It's not anger. I'm not angry. I'm just like, Papa, please go rest. Let us take over, make our own mistakes, please.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on the Swiss mediation process to address the deteriorating Anglophone crisis in Cameroon?
I think I don't know enough about it to comment on it. I don't know if it's genuine. I would hope that it's genuine because at least it's progress. You know, I think if we had started with dialogue in 2016, we wouldn't be where we are now. But the difference is, you know, I always say that when I talk to some of my Francophone friends, even those who in the bottom of their heart, they feel for us, but they don't really understand, right? And I can't really expect them to because they don't have the same experience. Like they don't have the same living experience. They haven't lived through the same things. So, but I think that we had to start with dialogue. The problem is you had two groups, right? You had government and you had the movement at the time that were speaking in two different, not just languages as in one English, one French, right? But two different mindsets, completely different mindsets. And so without realizing that they're thinking from two different mindsets. And I think that if I had had any advice to give to the government back then and the same that I would give to them today, is understand that you don't understand, right? It's almost like even if you're like in using the racial situation, right? So if you're a white male and you're a black woman is talking to you about, I feel like you discriminated against me. You can't know better than her what she feels. And so no matter how much you say that, no, I never discriminated, I treat you the same, that's not how I feel, right? And so because there was this breakdown in the way they communicate from the very beginning, and the Anglophones also not understanding that the Francophones are coming from a completely different, even historical basis. We don't even know the same history. I'm blessed. I say blessed because I went to French school. I went to Francophone school. And I know what they learned about our history. And it's not the same that I learned at home. And it's not so you have, you know, Anglophones frustrated that Francophones don't understand or can't relate, and they think that the Francophones are acting in bad faith. But it's because they don't know. They've never been taught. They've never been told anything different than what the government has been saying. So it's a real difference in the approach and not realizing that one is talking Chinese and the other person is speaking, you know, German. It's not even between Anglophones and Francophones. It's a real, very different way of looking at the world from a very different historical perspective, and that created this problem that because it become a war today. And you know, I don't know what the dialogue, that dialogue is really. I don't know what that is about. I'm hoping it's genuine, but I don't see how you can dialogue when those people that you have to dialogue with are all in Kundingi, right? So, you know, I think that there's who are you talking to? I don't know who you're talking to, but you're not talking to the people that are representative of those that have the issues. So, I'm not very optimistic about that process, as long as many people as we know are locked up in prison and not able to participate in this dialogue.
So I'll just read a few comments and not ask you more political questions. And for those of our audience watching, some of you have expressed an interest to ask questions. So I've put a link in the comment section that you can use, and we can bring you on live to ask all your questions to our Queen of Tech. So one question we have here, we had a question from Emmanuel Fon, who was saying, what are some tips Mrs. Rebecca can give to young entrepreneurs and startups on how to go about funding, which doors to knock, etc.? Thanks for interesting interview, was worth my time.
So what advice I would give to somebody that's looking for funding? First, have your product ready. Have at least a prototype of your product, right? So, and understand that the investor is going to invest in your business growth and in taking your product to where it is, to where it needs to be in order to become a profitable business. They're not investing in your comfort, right? There's no comfort in entrepreneurship. So if you think that you're going to go raise money because, oh my goodness, I've had this happen so many times. Like, oh, but I have a family, I need to care for my family. I'm like, I'm not investing in that. You're going to have to continue to sacrifice. And so the entrepreneur will continue to have to show that the funding is going towards, launching the product to a larger market or in a new market. And so but have something, don't come with an idea. So many people have ideas. Oh, so many ideas. Oh, and I'm the only one to have this idea. No, so many people have had your idea. Are you able to execute on, do you have a plan and are you able to execute on that plan? Show me that you can, and I will invest. That investors are trying to make money. By the way, it's not charity.
No.
It's investment. And so my hope as an investor is that if I put money in your company today and I put $10,000, and we saw, right, those people that put, $10,000 in Uber when it first started, how that became $15,000, right? How that, $15 million, right? So I think investors always are all looking for that type of opportunity, where they're seeing a product that has potential, that needs financial support, and they need to take it to the next level. But I encourage you, there's so many hubs across Africa. I really encourage you, go register in your hub, get the support. They will, and I do mentor the entrepreneurs that are in our hub, right? That are at ActivSpaces. I don't have enough time to mentor everybody, but at least I commit to those that are in our hub, and I spend time with them and I look at what they're doing and I try to support them as much as I can and get them ready for this investment.
So we have another comment here from Henry Inobane, who's saying lots of funds change hands in informal groups. Like Njangi and other associations, we can create local financial houses operating with rules similar to those of Njangi houses. And we have Robert Fondra here, who's saying big supermarkets are the European way of shopping in Africa. We do well with the corner store. And we have Terence and Tinife, who's saying Africans are the solution for Africa. And we have I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, Arnaud Aho, ideas for Cameroonians by Cameroonians. Someone here is not very happy that you said Immaculate Nkume is saying, I'm angry that man no be notre papa.
I hear you. Dude, I have to get back to Cameroon now. I might get there. They won't let me inside.
So we have Bacham Santa Emene who's saying anti-Bex with the sense. If I catch anyone saying rubbish again, I stand. So we have Kinder Bueno here who's saying, please let's protect Rebecca by not asking her some political questions. We've got Asheri Meredith who's saying, Pabia, go and rest so we can take over and make our own mistakes. And Deli Singer Philip saying, oh yes, they don't really understand. Another comment still from Robert Fondra who's saying, I think the problem we have is overflowing ego. I think it's to the question dealing with the women. If the situation would have changed, if women were at the forefront of solution mediating. Women have less ego than men. With women in decision-making positions, they might have decision-making closer to those concerned. This is what I think we need. So
nice to hear that from a man. Thank you.
Yeah. And so, so we have a question here from Jean-Marc Nichu. My question to Rebecca will be to know what is advice in the project allowing to pay their health bills by mobile money?
Well, I mean, there are some of those projects already that exist. So there are a number of systems like that where you can pay. You can pretty much pay anybody by mobile money that has a mobile money account. So you don't have to create a special one only for healthcare. But there are some applications that where you can monitor your healthcare, that can manage a clinic or a hospital, that include payments management by mobile money. But certainly, we just need to encourage more people to create mobile money accounts on the various platforms and to use them to conduct business. From even in the last 3 years, 3 years, I mean, I've seen the growth across the continent. It used to be that only Kenya with M-Pesa, East Africa in general was, using mobile money, but now we see it more and more and more. The growth in mobile money, if anybody looked at even MTN's reports, mid-year financials, they'll see that the importance of mobile money in their growth, because the rest of the business is not going as well, but mobile money is growing by leaps and bounds. So I think that we need to understand that mobile money is now here. It's not going anywhere, and we start to rethink whether or not, people like at MasterCard and Visa won't like that, but we're not going to go through that credit card thing. So this is our ability to leapfrog, is that we don't need that card, right?
Yeah.
That our financial system is going to be different than that.
So I have a question here from Bole Kane, who's saying that, what do you think about funds for your business? Seems like everyone is utilizing that now. It's becoming a crowd idea. And just sorry, before you answer that question, in countries like Nigeria, they don't allow crowdfunding because of some antiquated law or something. So carry on.
As a matter of fact, they don't allow crowdfunding in most countries, including in Cameroon, where we are crowdfunding. But the difference is that you can crowdfund for your business. So you can create a platform and raise money for yourself, right? When we say that crowdfunding isn't allowed, it's generally that you have a business that's a crowdfunding platform where people will come and put their projects, and then anybody else can come and so the crowdfunding platform creates the relationship, right? But it's not. But a startup raising their own money is allowed to raise money using crowdfunding. But this is one area that we've talked about when we talk about policies, right? So there's a South African woman who right now is working to try to get regulations for crowdfunding in place that are favorable to entrepreneurs from across the continent. She's even engaged with our Central African banks, central bank, to try to get, so there are efforts being made right now to make sure that crowdfunding is included, and it's a very large or important part of what those regulations will look like. Now, is it a good idea to crowdfund? Not everybody can launch a successful crowdfunding campaign, right? We've seen Kiro being incredibly successful because they almost have promoted this as a product, right? So they have a whole marketing campaign behind the crowdfunding. So if you go onto a platform and you just go and say, oh, I'm raising money for this project, don't expect to have the same success rate, right? This was a crowdfunding campaign. It wasn't just raising money via crowdfunding. And I think that's what makes Kiro very unique. And they created a platform within which they could share information about the business, about how it's going. Not only will not everybody be successful at raising money this way, so it's not easy. It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of thought. But even those who are able to raise, the risk that you run is that you're taking people's money that aren't experienced investors. And their expectations might not be met, right? No matter how much text you have on the screen that says, we're not, you won't see your money again for a while, it's a long-term investment, 2030, whatever. It doesn't matter what you write.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody that's taken their hard-earned money, that's not a professional investor or
Mm-hmm.
isn't an experienced investor, is doing it really more to support as a means to support the community.
Mm-hmm.
When they see you, and your company is making tons of money in 2 years or has raised millions of dollars, and then they're seeing that they're not getting a return on their investment because
Mm-hmm.
you said, no, we're keeping that money until 2030. I fear that there could be some backlash. So
Yeah.
we have to be very careful. It's not an easy way to raise money. And it's not a sure way, even in the long term to raise money, but it is an option, and it's an option that we should use. It's a tool. Angel investment is another tool. Venture capital is another tool. One tool that we should just not worry about too much is banks, right? This is not, don't spend a lot of energy on banks.
Yeah, so I have a comment here from Lumne Angela. Personally, I see a lot of amazing startups in the early stage, especially in Cameroon, but majority really never grow or scale up. What do you think are some of the issues apart from political problems?
I think some of it is being in the right environment. And again, I always encourage you, like the use of a hub helps you for several reasons. First of all, is that they give you the tools, right? They help you tell you how to create your business model, and then it's more accountability, because when you're especially when you're in a formal incubation program, you set targets, right? As a startup, you set targets and you're accountable to another entrepreneur, you're accountable to somebody else, because at the end of the month, we'll come look at, okay, these are the targets that we set. These are the objectives that we set in your business. Where are you based on those targets? What have you been able to accomplish? What haven't you accomplished? Not all entrepreneurs feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And being accountable to somebody that's not an investor, that's not, that's not a partner, that's,
Yeah.
they don't necessarily, so you need to leave your ego at home. If you want to be successful as a startup entrepreneur, you need to leave your ego at home. You need to listen to advice,
Yeah.
but also go forward. Don't give up, right? Because it's so easy to give up when we have so many challenges that it's so easy to give up. It's so easy. And it's our families, our friends, they don't understand entrepreneurship. It's like, why are you wasting your time on that thing? Go get a job. They don't get it. And so it can be very lonely to be an entrepreneur, which again, get involved in a community, support each other, and move forward together. And I think that's how you can be successful.
So we have another question here from Banga Pen. One of the things needed to grow the business is awareness. How can the platform of ActivSpace assist entrepreneurs in this direction?
So one thing that we do is that your startup is listed obviously on our website. We do talk about the startups that are involved in our community. We also share a lot of opportunities with them, because if there are opportunities for grants, which I don't love, but it's a great way to start, when you don't have enough money, you get into a competition and you get 5,000 or 25,000. It really can help. And so we get a lot of those within ActivSpaces. We receive a lot of those requests, say, hey, by the way, there's this competition or that competition, or there's this opportunity for entrepreneurs. And we're able to share that with our community of entrepreneurs.
So I have another quick comment here from Robert, who's saying that many security issues have been raised with the mobile money systems, mostly not tech related though. Call box people have devised means to swindle money from poor men and women in our villages. And we have
I think we always have dishonest people, regardless of the system. We need to raise more awareness so that our cousins and aunts and uncles that are in the village can better use those tools, so that they don't have to go through a call box in order to receive their funds. So it goes through education. It will take time, and I think that our systems, the mobile money systems, will become better, and we'll address some of these issues as we go forward.
Okay, so I have a last question from Jean-Marc before we carry on. Jean-Marc Nichu, thanks a lot, Rebecca. Another question, please. What happens if an entrepreneur raises money and uses it on his project, but this one ends up not being successful? Must he pay the money back?
No, and as a matter of fact, most of the startups will end up that way. And that's not unique to our environment. That's all over the world. Most startups and most investments don't, like, we lose our money. As investors, we just lose our money, which is why it's such a risk for us. You can't pay the money back because it's not a loan. And you did what you were supposed to and you still failed. It will happen. You have, it happens. And from an angel investment standpoint, one of the things that ABAN has done is organize some boot camps and some master classes. We had one in Cameroon a couple years ago, where we had very experienced investors come to share their experience in angel investing. And one of the things we hear over and over and over again is that you have to build, as an investor, a portfolio of companies. You can't just invest in one company, right? Because the likelihood of that company failing is quite large. And what they're saying is that, you'll build a portfolio of maybe 15 companies in which you put in money. Out of those 15, 5 will fail dramatically. You'll lose all your money, right? And 2 won't lose money, but won't make money, right? 1 may make you a little bit of money, and then, or 2 may make you a little bit of money, and then 1 will be incredibly successful. And so that's the one that pays for all the rest, right? That's the one where you put in 5,000 and it turns into 250,000, which is a very specific example that I have in Africa. It's not some taken from Silicon Valley. This is, an investor friend of mine that put in 5,000 and got 250,000 as a return on his investment. And then that allows him to spread the risk. So you need to spread the risk as an investor. But yeah, I mean, we lose money. If the startup fails, they fail. And I don't mind, as long as the entrepreneur use the money in order to build the business and not to go, just like get a new car and, this is not comfort money. I always say that it's not comfort money.
Yeah, so I have a question here from Tommy Davies. What should entrepreneurs do to check out investors?
That's a very good point. And yeah, that's a very good point. What can they do to, I need to get a battery. I need to get charge my phone. It's fine. I have lots of charging there. But so what can entrepreneurs do to check out investors? The best thing is, are they part of a network? It's so helpful when the investor is already part of a network, because the network serves as kind of a filtering system, filters out the people that are not serious as investors. So I would say that the easiest thing you can do is to check out if they're part of a network. Also, what other investments have they made? What is their relationship with the entrepreneurs in which they've already invested? Those are some of the things that you can look at.
Okay.
And I'm not leaving. I'm just going to get a charger.
No, that's fine. And while you are gone, so we're going to go through some of the comments.
I'm listening.
It's all right. So we're going to be reading some of the comments here. So I'm sorry, Dean, that I've not been able to ask you a question, but I think it has some political elements, which is why I've been avoiding it. So Dean was asking, is the crisis in Cameroon today as a result of the unfinished decolonization process by the British in the 60s, or is it because the Francophones are not taught their history in school? If so, are the Anglophones complaining of the average man not knowing their history, or are they complaining about the systematic assimilation by their elites in government?
Wow. Yeah, that's a complicated question for me. But one thing that I would say is that look at the Hong Kong crisis today, right? So they all speak the same exact language, but they developed different systems. We can complain morning, noon, and night that we're just colonized and we're dealing with two different colonial legacies, but it's the truth. We don't like it, but it's a truth, right? So we might reject that as an argument, but the fact is that these are very different systems. Just like Hong Kong and China have different systems, even though it's the same language. So, if you can see and understand and try to understand the challenges that that Hong Kong is and what they're trying to fight for today and why they're protesting today, I think you can better understand why Anglophones were protesting. Listen, this is the system that we've been using for longer than we've been together, because even before the Germans, we had English-speaking schools, Alfred Saker, etc. So this is the system of schooling that we're used to. This is the system of justice that we're used to. You're coming and you're wanting to change it all to be an image of a French-based system. So, you may not like the way we've been doing it, but that's our system. And I think that's also what the people in China and Hong Kong are fighting over today. So
yeah. So anyways, we'll carry on. You fought hard, or you've been advocating for the release of Maurice Kamto and Michel Docquy, among others, especially for journalists. Are you not afraid that the wrath of La République will descend on you, as exemplifying the cases of the two just named?
Listen, you know what? Yeah, of course. I'm not. I worry about the wrath, as you called it. I worry about it, but I'm not afraid of it. I love my freedom, and that includes my freedom to think, and my freedom to express myself, and my freedom to feel. And I love that freedom. So for me, it's sometimes I feel like there are some Cameroonians that are more imprisoned than those that are in Kundingi.
That's a nice
one. And it's not to minimize the difficulty and the tragedy of all those people that are in prison in Kundingi. But sometimes I feel like we've locked ourselves in this mentality that is a prison. So you may feel like you can walk and you freely, but you're not free. You're not free. And so we need to free our minds, and we start there. Because it's not, there's nothing rational about all those people being in Kundingi today. Nothing rational about it. But somehow, some Cameroonians that are outside are able to rationalize it. I don't know how they do that. And I can't. So yes, I will continue to advocate on behalf of those whom I feel might be in prison for and it shouldn't be. And that's my freedom, because if I don't, who will? Like, I always say this, is like, there's some things that I can say and do because I have a voice, and I don't think our good Lord gave me this voice either on social media or, in places of where there are people of authority, just to use it to talk about me. I think part of it is to bring and to raise attention and awareness to issues that I can't solve, but maybe somebody that hears me can solve.
Yeah. So you fought hard to bring back our internet on Twitter and any platform that you are quoted an audience, you discuss this issue. So thank you very much for contributing to getting internet into the Anglophone regions of Cameroon. I am sure the tech community are overjoyed. And granted, huge losses were made as a result. And they continue with the current crisis, as you already outlined, in the relationship between crise des devises and shortage in exports from the Anglophone region. So shutting down the internet has become the weapon of choice amongst governments to censor people. Can we not say that there was a silver lining with this move by the Cameroon's government, as it allowed developers or those in the tech business to create solutions that do not rely on using the internet?
Yes. Well, yes. I mean, that's the silver lining. Certainly, what we saw is a lot of innovation. Again, how do we circumvent the system? And again, I always repeat this because the sense of community in with the Anglophones in Boya, that were actually carrying phones back to Douala in order to have other people access the internet, download the messages, and then take the phones back. We saw a lot of that. And we've also seen that some social networks, and I don't want to name them right now because I don't know who's listening, and I don't want them to go and start targeting them. But yeah, we did see the creation of some local social networks and local messaging systems. That it would be difficult to ban without cutting off the entire internet, which I think they've learned their lesson there.
Yeah. So I'll just quickly read some comments relating to what we just said earlier. So we have this from Kingsley Shete. The worst form of imprisonment is mental rather than physical, just like you said. Mimi Mefo says, I call it mental jail. The victims are bound. The system is responsible. So we have someone here saying, first time following Delhi TV Live, and I'm glad I did.
Thank you for joining.
And so we have Paul Tentau, who's saying that there are more Cameroonians who are in prison than those who are in Kondengi, therefore high level of mental imprisonment in Cameroon. Really good one there. Thank you. So we're going to move on to something slightly different here, Rebecca, and it's a fire round question.
This round, I know which one's coming.
Very quick responses, and you're not to think it all before responding, so it should be a natural knee-jerk response. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okie doke, let's go. Google Chrome or Safari?
Google Chrome.
Windows or iOS?
Windows.
Mark Zuckerberg or Mark Benioff?
Oh, Benioff. All the way.
Michelle Ducky or Kawala?
Oh, come on. You're asking Kawala.
L'apéro de bagarre ou loge loge?
L'apéro.
Patrice Ngana ou Achille Mbembe?
Achille Mbembe.
Boya or Washington, D.C.?
Boya.
World Bank or BAYAC?
World Bank.
Timbuktu or Fumban?
Fumban.
Scrambled eggs and toast or Kwakoko Bible?
Oh, come on. Who eats scrambled eggs? Let's move on.
Bensikin dance or Makosa?
Makosa.
Afro hair or wig?
Oh, I know how this is my hair. So I said it's not Afro. No weave, no wig, not yet.
So you survived that round. How do you feel? Would you have changed your answers if you had more time to think about them?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, great. So we're gradually coming towards the conclusion, Rebecca. Do you have any final words to the Cameroonians out there who look up to you as a mentor?
Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. So one thing I don't want to be cubbyholed into some respectable woman isn't allowed to say this or do that. And I, this past week on Twitter, I expressed myself on a subject that most people didn't expect me to express myself on. And you know what? I want to be free that way. I don't want to be put in a box of what is proper for me to do and say and what is not proper for me to do and say. It's, after my many years on Earth, I think I've earned the right to express myself on the topics that I want and in the manner in which I want. And I don't take that away from me. So
Yeah. Okay, so we have a quick question here before we close. So we have a question from Bama in Namata who's saying, Rebecca, the government thinks about the digital economy every day without any tangible results. Do you have any ideas on how to better engage with government? There is obviously massive support that is being misappropriated from this front.
Yeah, I don't even know what that support is, to be honest. I think that there are some programs that they've launched that are, that, as I said, they're well intentioned. It's just that they're not going to go anywhere. So I think that there's a mix between two things. There's a mix between complete incompetence, and I'm looking at the. There's a mix between total incompetence and a mix with maybe corruption and those types of things. And there's a mix. And I'm not everybody is bad, everything is bad. There are some people that are in this government that are trying to do things. I wish they would talk to us because we would make it so much easier for them. But I have refused to take 1 franc from them. Right, like not that they've offered, to be honest, but I don't even want ActivSpaces to receive money from the government because for some reason like you always end up like it always ends up being a scandal some way down the road, and then I don't want my name to be associated to that, and I don't want ActivSpaces' name to be associated to that. But I'm not categorical, all are bad. There's just a level of incompetence there that's mixed in with the bad faith. Yeah.
Quickly, we have, I think people know that we're closing, so everyone wants to send in their last questions before we go. So I have a question from a gentleman here by the name of Habis in Sowi. Hi, madam. My question is on Twitter. Cameroon isn't on the list of locations when you're checking trends or searches. I think that's because we've not really much Cameroonian presence on Twitter. What do you think can be done about this? As I find Twitter really good, interactive and educative, so we should know our trends.
Well, I don't work for Twitter, but they should hire me, right? But they should, yeah. So to tell them how to better penetrate the Cameroonian market. But actually, I do know some people inside Twitter, and we've started that conversation. There are a lot of our accounts that aren't certified. There are some accounts that we had some accounts that got suspended. And that should never have gotten suspended. We already have a dialogue with Facebook so that, and we have an open line with Facebook so that when they suspend an account from one of our activists or journalists, because the government trolls were able to tag them, we're able to. We do know how to get that information to Facebook for them to restore those accounts. What we don't have is that same relationship with Twitter at this moment, but we're building it. And so we're hoping that the same things that we've been able to do with Facebook, we'll be able to do with Twitter. Some of those things are, again, the trends, yes. Having the certifications for more of our accounts, especially for activists and politicians on both sides on all sides. And yeah, so that dialogue has started.
Yeah. So what is your impression of daily TV?
It was so much fun. It was so much fun and no stress. So no too many hard questions. So yeah, I really appreciate the time that you gave me. I feel very honored to have this opportunity to speak to a larger community of people that aren't necessarily on Twitter, because I run my mouth on Twitter day in, day out. But I'm not on Facebook. I'm not very active on Facebook. So thank you for allowing me to share.
There you have it, good people. As all good things must come to an end. Rebecca, thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit with us. You have no idea how grateful we are and how much we've been.
I'm the one that's grateful. Thank you very much.
And so to everyone out there, Rebecca is not on Facebook very much, but she's very active on Twitter. You can follow her. She's at AfriTechie. So she has African Techie.
And on Instagram.
Okay, and she's also on Instagram. So people, please do follow her. She has always a lovely information to share, very informative stuff. I follow her as well. I learn a lot from her tweets. So to all our audience out there, thank you for always sticking with us and being fair in your diverse opinions. And until next time, enjoy your weekend. Thank you. And goodbye. Bye.